Welcome to Writers Radio. I'm Carol Harmon, your host for this program. Una Suseli O'Connell's essay, They Lived Ever After, inspired this episode of Writers Radio. I had been looking for a theme that resonated with the polarity of light and dark, so evident at this time of the year, when her newsletter arrived in my inbox. Although Una grew up in England, her mother was Swiss and her father Irish, cultures rich in imaginative folklore. Una is a teacher, family constellation practitioner, and author of biographies, memoir, and essays. With no further ado, here is Una Suseli O'Connell of Letchworth, England, reading her essay, They Lived Ever After.
They lived ever after. Einstein is credited as saying, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. In 1965, my father gave me a copy of Grimm's fairy tales. Unusually, there is no dedication. Instead, in wobbly handwriting, are the words, Sunday, May 23rd, Suseli from Poppy. Dad gave me a lot of books as I was growing up, and he generally wrote something pithy and poetic on the flyleaf. His words went over my head, but I never asked him to explain them because, well, I didn't want to appear stupid. 60 years on, and that book he gave me still sits on my bookshelf. Printed in Czechoslovakia and illustrated by the German expressionist painter Joseph Scharl, it contains 210 stories and concludes with a folkloristic commentary by Joseph Campbell. There is nothing about Scharl's illustrations that seem appropriate for a 6-year-old. The faces of kings, trolls, devils, and witches are terrifying, and the anguished expressions of fishermen, bridegrooms, sisters, and servants imply a world of worry and trouble. Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm were born in Kassel, Germany, in the late 18th century, and their stories were collected from local farmers, weavers, tailors, and grandmothers. The Grimm brothers sought not beauty, but accuracy, from mouth to ear to page. I was once asked about my favourite childhood fairy tale. The one you choose, apparently, is a reflection of how you see your own life. I was obsessed by The Singing Ringing Tree, based on Hurleburlebuts by the Brothers Grimm. It was first shown on the BBC in 1964 as part of the Tales from Europe series. The Singende, Klingende Bäumchen was an East German production, and the German dialogue would play simultaneously with the voice of the English narrator. This conflicting jumble of voices and language only served to amplify the sinister quality of the characters, who all looked as though they'd walked off an Otto Dix painting. Even the good prince transformed into a bear by the wicked dwarf looked weird and scary. The music was menacing, The whole thing was utterly compelling. The magic tree would only sing and ring in an atmosphere of true love and kindness. As every child in every school playground must learn, friendship and affection need to be earned and cannot be insisted upon or enforced. My parents were at work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and so I would watch the singing ringing tree by myself. I used to worry that one day they'd walk in, switch off the television, and forbid me from watching it ever again. Joseph Campbell writes about the visionary rather than the descriptive quality of fairy stories, and he says, "The ageless tale of human destiny, recognized for all its cannibal horrors as a marvelous, wild, monstrous, irrational, and unnatural wonder tale. This is the story our spirit asks for. This is the story we receive." Einstein declared that the gift of fantasy meant more to him than any talent for abstract, positive thinking. I am looking forward to reading fairy tales with my 2 granddaughters. Not the bright, plumped-up cartoon versions, but the ones my mother used to read to her grandchildren. Holly and Lucy's favourite was Snow White and Rose Red, the tale of 2 sisters, a bear prince, and a devilish troll with missing teeth.
Medwyn McConachy also grew up in England before emigrating to Canada as a young woman to spread her wings. She is a painter, textile artist, writer, and a witch who lives on Salt Spring Island, one of the small islands in the archipelago off Canada's west coast.
Vasilysa and the Colored Stones, a tale inspired by the late 18th century Russian fairy tale of the Baba Yaga. One day, as the Baba Yaga finished her dinner, she pulled out a small chest, lifted its lid, and took out a brightly colored board, a bag of colored stones, and a brown velvet cloth. Laying these on the table, she beckoned to Vasilysa to join her. By this time, Vasilysa had been working for the Baba Yaga for 350 of the agreed 366 days since her capture. Obediently, she played the stones game until the Baba Yaga tired of it and pulled down her pipe for her evening smoke. That night, when Vasilysa went to bed, her doll began jumping around under the pillow, and the 2 of them had a whispered conversation. The doll had been a gift from Vasilysa's dying mother to help and guide her. Each evening when Vasilysa played the stones, she noticed they seemed to move in ways that suggested some type of message. The Baba Yaga now complained daily of how she would suffer without Vasilysa to cook for her. Every evening when she flew in, she exclaimed, "Ah, you are still here? Good then, I will eat well one more night," as if she was tempting Vasilysa to leave before her time. Vasilysa always kept her word. She knew exactly how many days were left before the end of her contract. She thought about the secret of the stones. It was time to ask them for help. One day, while the Baba Yaga was away from the house, Vasilysa opened the chest, laid the cloth, and set the stones on the board. She then settled herself in her favorite chair, and as she thought, the stones had a lot to say. They moved quickly over the board, warning Vasilysa of what was to come. She saw herself locked in the small attic room with heavy chains attached to her ankles, secured to the bedposts while she slept. She saw herself doing all her chores with the chains dragging behind her, secured to the center pole of the house. Soon she noticed that it was not a young girl in the pictures, but an old, bent woman, and she recognized herself. Shocked, she knew now that the Baba Yaga planned to forcibly keep her as her servant for the rest of her life. Vasilysa sat, dazed by what she had seen, the cold hand of fear gripping her heart. She was unable to move. Suddenly, there was a dreadful clatter as all the pots and pans in the kitchen began to dance. Vasilysa leapt to her feet. The stones, the board, and the cloth jumped into the chest, while Vasilysa fired up the oven and had the Baba Yaga's dinner ready when she arrived home. The next day, as Vasilysa went about her chores, she heard a soft voice coming from her favorite chair. "Come, sit with me while I tell you a story." Vasilysa sank down gladly into the comfort of the chair and listened. Lulled into repose once again, the day wore on until suddenly the great kitchen clattering started. Vasilysa leapt to her feet. In the nick of time, with the help of her doll, she had the dinner cooked and the house in order when the Baba Yaga flew in. On the third day, her final day, according to the agreement, Vasilysa prepared as she had learned from the chair. She took the grease from the duck she had roasted the night before and smeared it over the center pole of the house. She smothered the door locks and hinges. She greased the broom handle. She greased the outside steps and the railing. Then Vasilysa cooked the finest meal she had ever prepared. That night, as the Baba Yaga drew near, the smell of cooking filled her with a great hunger. She flew into the house, anticipating the delicious feast. Vasilysa laid the dinner on the table, as usual. The Baba Yaga greedily gobbled it up, as usual. They played their game, as usual. The Baba Yaga smoked her pipe, as usual. But as the clock struck 12, Vasilysa rose from her chair, made sure she had her doll in her pocket, turned towards the door, and began to walk away. The Baba Yaga let out a loud screech, lunged for her broom, which of course slipped right out of her hand, lost her balance, grabbed the center pole, which slithered out of her grasp, and shouted, "Stop! Stop!" All the while, Vasilysa was determinedly walking away. Then the Baba Yaga ordered the doors of the house to close and lock, but the grease made them slide apart again. Beside herself with rage, the Baba Yaga grabbed the stones and flung them at Vasilysa, ordering them to block her from leaving. But the stones, as you probably know by now, were no ordinary stones. They were the hearts of all the young women the Baba Yaga had eaten, the young women who had failed her tests. They held no loyalty to the Baba Yaga. They were Vasilysa's allies. In the next instant, the Baba Yaga felt the stinging pain of hundreds of small stones hurtling themselves into her. Still screaming, she followed Vasilysa, lost her footing on the greasy stairs, grabbed for the greasy railing, and collapsed on the ground. Vasilysa patted her pocket for some extra courage and quietly walked away from the house. When she reached the fence, all of the skulls of the Baba Yaga's victims, they called out "Hooray for Vasilysa!" and shone their lights into the dark forest. Vasilysa slipped away to find a new life of freedom.
Graem Castell was born in Singapore in 1939. His family escaped the Japanese invasion of Malaya in 1942, seeking refuge in Australia, then India. He served as a Gurkha officer in Malaya during what was known as the Malaya Emergency, when British troops repelled communist and insurgent attacks on the government in a guerrilla conflict lasting from 1948 to 1960. During the swinging 60s, Graem opened restaurants on Kings Road, Chelsea, and on a Mediterranean island, before abandoning capitalism to found a spiritual community on Iona, a small island off the coast of Scotland. It would seem Graem's entire life trajectory has travelled by way of Beachy Head.
By way of Beachy Head. We Brits have a saying, probably unfamiliar to many now, to go somewhere or do something by way of Beachy Head. Beachy Head on the south coast of England is mainly famous for its lighthouse. It's not a spot that anyone would normally include in their itinerary from anywhere to somewhere else. Sometimes, in my experience and perhaps in yours, we arrive where we need to be or achieve what we need to achieve by a strange, often uncomfortable route or set of circumstances. For example, a guy flies to Paris to hook up with his current girlfriend and finds her in the arms of another. On his return flight home, upset and significantly poorer, he sits next to the woman who will become his lifelong partner, the love of his life. Bingo! He got to that happy destination by way of Beachy Head. Or someone wildly disappointed at not being accepted for a job falls into a much better one shortly afterwards, one that they'd never have heard about if they'd been accepted earlier. They arrived at that happy conclusion by way of Beachy Head. A few years ago, my wife and I made an abortive move from Vancouver to Ontario. It involved massive preparation and execution, the selling and packing up of our treasured home of 18 years, the rearrangement of our employments, the long-distance lining up of a new home in Guelph, and massive expense. Within 3 weeks of our arrival in Ontario, we realized that we needed to return to Vancouver, now homeless. What could have been the biggest fiasco of our lives turned out to be the most strategically valuable of steps, a rearrangement that we were unlikely to have conjured up on our own, and a shift in consciousness from must own and keep on working to absolutely no need to own or work. We found ourselves able to retire and live more comfortably than ever before, exactly where we needed to be, with fresh vistas ahead. And we reached that point, with or without divine help, by way of Beachy Head. P.S. And guess what? The universe somehow arranged for us to rapidly, unexpectedly, easily recoup every last penny of the considerable expenses of that massive turnaround.
Mohamad Kebbewar grew up in the ancient Syrian city of Aleppo, whose recorded history dates from the 3rd millennium. He moved to Canada at age 19 to pursue a degree in history at Concordia University in Montreal. In 2011, the Arab Spring uprising in Syria, which protested the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, quickly escalated into a full-scale civil war as foreign powers became involved. Several peace initiatives failed. The battle for Aleppo between 2012 and 2016 was named by combatants the Mother of Battles. Mohamad's essay, Fragmented, was written about his return to Aleppo in 2017 to visit his family and childhood home.
Fragmented. With blood, we write ourselves into consciousness. Writers pay more attention to the form. Words are chiseled into perfection, but empty of meaning, like a town square after a bomb. The poetic is lost. Oil is pumped, governments changed, people massacred. Perhaps the land is the problem. Fresh air is not free of charge. Birds' feathers fall from the crown of the minaret. State of absence, state of siege, the garden filled them with aroma and peace. Dead leaves fall on the pavement, so too fall the children of the city. Missiles fall like hail on a drought land, maps redrawn with fire and steel. Dreamers crushed under the heavy barrel bombs. They swept the ashes at the marketplace and went to the funeral. The phone buzzed on the table. 37 people killed in the candy store explosion. They carry their wounds on their faces and pray to God. A drop of rain soothes the hungry soil. Hope is reported missing. In the age of Jahiliyyah or ignorance, freedom was sexual. The rubble suffocates the jasmine tree. Those who made weapons sat in fancy hotel rooms, buttoned up in silk suit to discuss peace. The hearts of our children bleed on their way to school. How will they love? Blood streamed on a barricaded road, a field of mothers. Farewell, Syria. Birds sing on a broken branch of the lemon tree. Fire burned my olive tree. My Sunati, my love. Who is God? What is God? In the marketplace, I look for God. I write my home in the depth of Al-Qasida. With every word, my beloved asks me, why do you write? Come along and hang out with us. Forget the world. I write myself on a blank page into a poem. I write to stay alive. I write because writing is the beginning of humanity. Because without writing, there is no history. Without a record, a debt cannot be paid. No proof of blood or mother's tears. I roam around the walls of Aleppo, through centuries and empires, here an Ottoman house, There, a French church, a history full of blood and ammunition, piled up on the sidewalk. The elderly and children weep, even stone and steel cry. Words bleed inside my vein. She takes a picture of her home. The photograph becomes a living thing. It was the last proof of the city, the place where I first opened my eyes. I pace back and forth in my memories of shattered home.
The next two readings are excerpts from stories collected in the recently published anthology, Off the Map. This is an unusual collection of work from Vancouver writers with lived experience of mental health issues. Our first story is read by Kate Bird, who's also one of the editors. Kate is a professional librarian and researcher. She has published creative nonfiction essays and several best-selling books of newspaper photography.
This is an excerpt from Shelter. Icy shards of rain stream from my umbrella and seep up the sleeves of my raincoat as I race to a work Christmas party at the Hotel Vancouver. Neon signs and Christmas lights blur into soft focus slicks of color. Rainwater gushes down the gutter, pools at the storm drain, so much rain. A woman appears before me. I stop, peer up from under my umbrella. Pale, gaunt face, dark circles, rain-soaked straggly hair. She shivers, clutches closed the thin fabric of her coat. Her quiet voice asks, "Do you have $1?" She extends her cupped hands, then lowers them. There's something about her that flusters me. I mutter no, rush past her up the street. My parents didn't set out to become drunks. It was an incremental process, an accumulation of life events and personality flaws and societal influence of the 1960s. Drinking was the rip current that dragged my parents into the depths of bad behavior. When the people I loved turned into people I hardly knew, people they themselves could hardly recognize. There were nights when I cowered in my room with a pillow over my head to drown out the shouting. Pelting rain bounces off the pavement. Someone wrapped in a sleeping bag lies on the subway vent. Another person huddles in a doorway behind a sheet of cardboard. I wonder what brought them to this. Neglect, abuse, poverty, addiction, bad decisions, bad luck. So much misery on this drenched and frigid night. When I was 20, I lived for a winter with my boyfriend in a rusted-out van. Nights in the insulated van were damp, dismal, interminable. One December evening, we passed a small cottage with a Christmas tree aglow in the window, a sight as welcoming as the beacon of a lighthouse. I imagined the warmth and comfort of the kitchen, the cozy beds piled with down quilts. That night, I swore to myself that I'd do everything in my power to never again have to camp outside in the equivalent of a tin can. The woman's face haunts me. Her pleading voice echoes in my ears. I think of the cold looks she's endured, avoiding, ignoring, unseeing, unfeeling. Like me. Oh yes, like me. Shame and regret flush my cheeks as though I've been slapped. I check entranceways and alleys, imagine finding her in a gloomy doorway, picture myself pressing a $20 bill into her palm. A few days before, I unpacked a box of Christmas decorations with my long-wished-for, late-in-life little family, a gift from the universe I'd once despaired of ever having. Handed ornaments to my 3-year-old son. "Thank you, Mama," he said, "for getting these ready for me." The Hotel Vancouver is decorated with Christmas trees and twinkling lights and festive garlands. I duck into the ladies' washroom, hang up my coat, swap my rubber boots for heels, smooth the creases in my best dress. As I fix my hair and makeup in the mirror, my gaze shifts to my eyes. Did I imagine the woman on the street to be a witch in a fairy tale? Able to conjure a switch and turn me into her into me? How often I've felt on the outside looking in. How close I've come to falling between the cracks and into dark places. It seems I've always existed in a liminal space, a netherland between who I might have been and who I ended up becoming. I imagine the woman, that night, the rain. She stops running, raises her face to the sky. Suddenly a warm raincoat wraps around her and boots protect her feet. She stands tall, opens her umbrella. A sheet of rain streams from it, forms a perfect circle, a liquid force field around her.
Our next reading by Venge Dixon, poet, visual artist, comic book creator, and musician, is a short excerpt from a longer and very entertaining story called Linus. Venge chose creative work to, quote, step outside the many externally assigned, designed, and forcefully imposed boxes she saw as surrounding each of us, and most punishingly, those of us who experience our lives outside of societal norms or within marginalized communities.
Linus arrived at night. The wind was a madness of snow on small branches. My friend handed me Linus's carrier. He scrunched ball-like in that cage and stared at me with what I decided to interpret as terror. Here is his litter, here is his litter box, here is his food, here is his bowl, here is his hairbrush. I need to go. The storm is here. She raced for her truck. Indoors, as I opened the carrier door, Linus uncoiled, a wire-sprung snake exploding from a peanut brittle tin. I froze, gobsmacked by the length of him, his speed. He was gone, racing. He disappeared into dark rooms. Screeching up the wooden stairs and up and down again, I sat, waited for him, waited for my heart to stop yammering. He was in my lap. He was off and running. A thud came from the kitchen. I reached the door in time to see him leap from the top of the refrigerator with a bag of fresh muffins clenched between his teeth. I put his food and water bowls down. He showed disdain. Muffins, muffins, muffins. What I had interpreted as his terror was my own. A cat. Damn it, a cat. What the hell was I thinking agreeing to take him? A crazy, long, liquid muffin-stealing cat. How would I proceed with my plan to kill myself now? I couldn't just leave him here on his own. I couldn't take care of him. I didn't know how. I couldn't take care of my own mad self. Damn it. How either of us slept through that night, I don't remember. Perhaps we didn't. My bed at the time was a leaky air mattress. Or maybe it wasn't leaking yet. He had sharp, non-retracting claws. Winter was brutal. Ice formed hard and 1/4 of an inch thick on the inside window pane. Strangers, we slept together for warmth those early weeks. My mind became quieter as Linus began to turn to me for small courtesies, acknowledging his skills in hunting, appreciating his daily gifts of corpuscles, and rubbing his yellow tummy where his dark stripes converged into polka dots.
You have been listening to readings by Una Suseli O'Connell, Medwyn McConachy, Graem Castell, Mohamad Kebbewar, Kate Bird, and Venge Dixon. The Anthology, Off the Map, Vancouver Writers with Lived Experience of Mental Health Issues, was published in spring 2025 and may be ordered from the publisher Bell Press Anthologies at bellpressbooks.com. Also visit unaoconnell.com for more of Una's work and Medwyn's Meanderings on Substack. For a longer account of Mohamad's return to Aleppo, I suggest his essay, Going Home, in aboutplacejournal.org. We shall all have to wait for Graham's completed memoir. This episode will be on air from November 24th to December 28th, 2025. It is also a podcast on the Writers Radio website or wherever you get your podcasts. Writers Radio is produced by Ingrid Rose and Carol Harmon, editorial, and Gary Sill, music, sound, and technical production. My heartfelt thanks go out to my fellow producers, authors, and to you, dear listener.
You have been listening to Writers Radio, a non-commercial collaborative project which presents talented writers reading their own work. These stories, essays, and conversations revisit the long tradition of oral storytelling that connects us to the inspiration behind the words. Be sure to check the website, writersradio.ca, to subscribe to our free notifications list. It's also a way of letting the writers know you are there and appreciating their creative work.
Writers Radio broadcasts from Half Moon Bay on the Sunshine Coast in Canada, traditional tribal land of the Sechelt Nation of the Coast Salish peoples. We express our gratitude for their wisdom teachings and land stewardship.